Olivia Green thought she had done the right thing. She exposed the truth behind a foundation that promised to change lives, only to reveal it was nothing more than a facade. But her reward for standing up against corruption? A shattered career, a tarnished reputation, and a daughter who had lost hope in the dream they had once shared. Now, Olivia finds herself at rock bottom, working a dead-end job at a fast food joint, while her daughter, Destiny, watches her dreams slip through her fingers. The world they fought to escape has swallowed them whole, leaving them questioning everything they thought they knew about success, integrity, and the promises made to them. But Destiny, inspired by her mother's resilience, refuses to give up. She decides to reclaim her own dream on her terms, stepping away from the broken system that betrayed them both. As Olivia grapples with the consequences of her actions, and Destiny rises from the ashes of lost hope, they will have to choose. Will they accept the system that crushed them, or will they fight for a future of their own making, even if it means defying everything they once believed? The real battle for their dreams is just beginning. Olivia Green wiped the back of her hand across her brow, feeling the sweat and exhaustion cling to her skin as the clock on the wall ticked closer to midnight. Another grueling shift, another long day spent serving people who often took her efforts for granted. Her legs ached from hours of walking between tables, her feet sore from standing. Yet she kept moving, refilling cups, wiping down tables, and checking the kitchen for the last few orders. Rosie's diner was nearly empty now, the last few customers finishing their meals with quiet chatter. The familiar hum of fluorescent lights above her head was a constant reminder that she had just 15 minutes left before she could clock out. Her daughter, Emma, was at home, probably asleep by now. Olivia couldn't help but think of Emma's face. The way her daughter's eyes lit up when she talked about basketball. It was that hope in her eyes that had kept Olivia going through countless shifts at Rosie's. The money she earned here was meager, but it paid the rent and kept food on the table. Tonight, she'd made just enough to cover the month's utilities and maybe squeeze in a few dollars for Emma's next basketball camp. The night had been slow, the kind of evening that left Olivia with too much time to think. Too much time to reflect on what she was sacrificing for her daughter's dreams. She pulled the last tray of silverware from the sink and began organizing it into neat piles, preparing for the final push before closing. Olivia was just about to finish cleaning the countertop when the bell above the diner door rang, signaling someone's entrance. She looked up, startled, as a tall figure ducked beneath the doorway, his shoulders slumped in exhaustion. He wore a dark, weathered jacket and a baseball cap pulled low over his face. Despite the late hour, his presence seemed to fill the space. For a moment, Olivia thought about telling him they were about to close, but something about the man's posture, his hunched shoulders and tired gait, made her hesitate. He was scruffy, his hair unkempt, and his face shadowed with the weight of someone who had been carrying too much for too long. A tired sigh escaped his lips as he stepped further into the diner, his eyes scanning the nearly empty space. There was a familiar discomfort in the way he looked around, as though he was trying to disappear. "Hey there," Olivia called out, trying to sound welcoming despite her fatigue. "We're about to close, but I can still grab you something quick if you need it." The man's eyes met hers, dark circles under them, his expression softening just slightly. "Thanks," he said in a low voice. "I just need something to eat. Been a long day." Something about him made Olivia pause. She'd seen a lot of tired faces come through Rosie's at night, the lonely night owls who needed more than just a meal. They needed a moment of peace, some semblance of comfort. She could sense it in his demeanor. He wasn't just hungry for food. Olivia nodded without hesitation, setting down the cleaning rag and walking toward him. "I'll make sure the kitchen can still rustle up something decent." As she led him to the far booth in the corner, her thoughts wandered to Emma again. Basketball camp was just around the corner, and she still didn't have the money to send her. The idea of cutting corners to scrape together the cash stung, but it was all she could do. Tonight, however, she could at least offer a moment of kindness to someone who needed it. The diner had strict rules about serving customers after 11:30. Rosie, the owner, was adamant about closing promptly, citing safety concerns and the fact that the kitchen staff needed to clean up. Olivia had seen plenty of latecomers turned away over the years. She'd even done it herself when the clock ticked past closing time. But this man was different. There was something in his tired eyes, something desperate, yet gentle, that made Olivia hesitate. She didn't know why, but she felt compelled to make an exception. "Don't worry about it," Olivia said with a soft smile, placing a menu in front of him. "I'll take care of it. You've had a long day. I know what that feels like." He gave her a tired, grateful smile, his eyes flickering with an emotion Olivia couldn't quite place. Maybe it was just hunger, maybe something more, but it made her decision feel right. The kitchen was about to shut down for the night, but she walked back toward the counter anyway. "Hey, can you whip up something for this guy?" she called to Marco, the cook, who had been half-heartedly cleaning the grill. "Chicken and waffles, if you can. It's a diner special." Marco, ever the grumpy cook, grumbled but didn't argue. "Fine. Last order, though." Olivia nodded in acknowledgement, glancing back toward the man in the corner booth. He was hunched over the menu now, his gaze fixed, as if the simple act of choosing a meal had momentarily brought him some peace. She couldn't explain it, but she had a feeling this was more than just a late-night transaction. Olivia knew she was breaking the rules, but there was no regret. Not yet, at least. When she returned to the man's booth with the menu, she felt the weight of Rosie's rules hanging in the air, but it didn't matter. This was one of those rare moments when the rules didn't seem as important. He hadn't asked for special treatment. In fact, he didn't seem to ask for anything at all. He was just a tired man, looking for food, something to ground him before the night was over. "What can I get you?" she asked, her voice more gentle now. "I'll have the chicken and waffles," he said. "And coffee, black." His voice was rough, but there was a warmth to it, like a forgotten kindness in a storm. "Good choice," Olivia said, smiling faintly. "Our chicken and waffles are legendary around here. My daughter says they're the best in town, though she might be a little biased since I'm the one who makes them." He looked up briefly, his face softening. "Sounds perfect. I haven't had a good meal in a while." She offered a small laugh. "We've all been there, haven't we? It's hard to find comfort sometimes." She thought of Emma again, of her basketball camp, of the constant pressure to make things work. "I don't have a daughter," he said, almost wistfully. "But I know what you mean." As she made her way back to the kitchen, Olivia couldn't help but wonder about him. He wasn't like the usual crowd of late-night patrons. He didn't seem to want to engage too much. The quiet type. She could respect that. The man ate his meal quietly, occasionally sipping from his coffee, eyes distant as if lost in thought. Olivia watched him from across the room as she cleaned tables and wiped down counters. His manner was calm but reserved, as though he didn't want to be noticed. His stillness was almost meditative, and there was something about the way he held himself that made Olivia keep her distance. When he finished, he didn't ask for anything more. He stood up, his movements slow but deliberate. As he left, he turned to Olivia. "Thanks for the meal," he said quietly. "It meant more than you know." Olivia smiled, nodding as she returned to her duties. She didn't notice immediately, but when she began locking up for the night, she saw the tip. The stack of bills left on the table. More than enough to cover her rent, let alone Emma's basketball camp. Took her breath away as she locked the diner doors and began turning off lights. Olivia felt a surge of gratitude. The $200 in tips, placed discreetly beneath her receipt holder, made her heart race with relief. She didn't count it right away, too tired to even process the full weight of it. Maybe this was the break she'd been waiting for. The thought of Emma's camp fund, now more than possible, brought a small, bittersweet smile to her face. If only everything else were that simple. With a final glance toward the empty diner, Olivia pulled her coat tighter around her shoulders, heading out into the cool night. The world outside seemed quieter, almost serene, as though it, too, was offering her a moment of peace. But as she walked away, she couldn't shake the feeling that her act of kindness might have been more than just a favor to a stranger. Something had shifted, And it wasn't just her tired legs or her aching heart. Something was coming, and she wasn't sure if it would be a blessing or a curse. Olivia Green's eyes fluttered open to the harsh buzz of her alarm clock, her body still feeling the weight of exhaustion. It was barely 6 a.m., but she knew the drill. Another day of trying to make ends meet. She groaned as she rubbed her face with the heel of her palm, the memory of her late-night shift still fresh in her mind. She had made the decision to help that man last night, and though she hadn't regretted it at the time, the aftermath was something she hadn't anticipated. As the reality of the morning set in, she felt the familiar weight of fear begin to creep in. The phone rang. It was a number she didn't recognize, but she knew who it was before she even answered. Olivia Green. Her manager Brad's voice boomed from the other side, unmistakable even through the groggy fog of early morning. "You've got some explaining to do." Olivia's stomach twisted into a knot. She straightened in bed, clutching the phone tightly to her ear, trying to keep her voice steady. "Brad, you know damn well you broke the rules last night." Brad's voice cut through her words, rising with each syllable. "I told you no customers after 11:30. And what do I find? You serving someone well past closing time. And you didn't even report it to me." Olivia's chest tightened. She hadn't thought about it last night. She'd been so focused on helping that man, who, as it turned out, was the least of her problems. She had no excuse. "I didn't mean to," she started, her voice faltering. "Cut the crap, Olivia," Brad snapped. "This isn't just about the rules, it's about responsibility. You don't just decide to throw everything away for some late-night customer. You know the risks. If anything had happened to that guy, we would have been liable. We can't afford that. You're lucky I didn't report you." Brad's voice on the phone seemed to grow louder, angrier, more detached from any sense of reason. Olivia's heart pounded as he continued his tirade, accusing her of being irresponsible. "I don't care if he was a regular. I don't care if he looked like he needed help. You're still on the clock until I say otherwise, Olivia," he barked. Her mind raced back to the moment in the diner. She'd offered him the booth, given him the food, and let the kitchen stay open just a little longer. She hadn't thought it would come to this. "I'm sorry," Olivia murmured, rubbing her temples as she sat up. "I'll be there soon to apologize in person." "No, you won't," Brad interrupted, a dark satisfaction lacing his voice. "I've already reviewed the footage from last night. You're lucky I'm not firing you on the spot." The words stopped Olivia dead in her tracks. She had hoped, prayed, that her decision to serve the customer would be overlooked or understood. She had worked at Rosie's for over 5 years, and had never once let anyone down like this. But now it seemed her kindness had come back to haunt her. Olivia heard the faint clicking of Brad's fingers on his keyboard as he pulled up the footage. "Here it is," he said coldly. 11:47 p.m. Look at this. On the other end, Olivia could hear the faint, distant sound of the video playing. The image of her walking across the diner, leaning over to take the customer's order long after the closing time had passed. The timestamp was clear, the evidence undeniable. "You should have known better. You always know better," Brad muttered, his anger not yet spent. "This is the last straw, Olivia. I'm gonna have to let you go. No more warnings, no more second chances." Olivia's heart sank as Brad's words began to sink in. Firing her. Just like that. "But Brad, Olivia began, her voice breaking slightly. "No, it's done," Brad snapped. "You're fired. Your apron and name tag. You're not coming back after this. You think you're the only one with responsibilities? I've got a business to run. We can't have employees making decisions like that. We can't afford it." "But I need this job," Olivia pleaded, her voice cracking as tears began to form behind her eyes. She swallowed hard, fighting to keep her composure. "I have a daughter, Brad. A daughter who's relying on me to make ends meet. She's counting on me, and I can't afford to lose this job." I don't care," Brad cut her off harshly. "Maybe you should have thought about that before breaking the rules. You've got your final paycheck waiting for you. You can pick it up in 2 weeks. I'll have someone mail your stuff." Olivia's breath hitched as the finality of it all crashed down on her. The job she had clung to, worked herself into the ground for, was gone. All because she'd extended a simple act of kindness. For a moment, the world seemed to spin, the weight of everything pressing down on her chest. The line went silent. Olivia stood there, her body trembling as the words played over and over in her mind. This was it. She was out of options. The phone call ended, and Olivia stared at the screen for a few moments, her mind struggling to process everything that had just happened. The silence in the room was deafening. She wiped her eyes, trying to shake off the sinking feeling in her stomach. She still had to figure out how to tell Emma that the basketball camp was no longer a possibility. The thought of letting her daughter down, of telling her that all her dreams would have to wait, made Olivia's chest tighten. But before she could gather her thoughts, her phone rang again. An unknown number. She hesitated, unsure if she was ready for any more bad news. "Hello," Olivia answered, her voice sounding weaker than she intended. "Is this Olivia Green?" A professional-sounding voice asked from the other end, sharp and clear. "Yes," Olivia replied cautiously. "This is Amy Thompson. I'm calling on behalf of Mr. Michael Jordan's office. He'd like to meet with you this morning at the Charlotte Hornets office for a discussion. Are you available?" The words didn't register immediately. Michael Jordan? The Michael Jordan? Olivia felt her pulse quicken as she sat up straighter, trying to make sense of the situation. Her first thought was that this had to be some sort of mistake or prank, but the tone in Amy's voice was unshakable. Professional. Real. I'm not sure I understand. Michael Jordan wants to meet with me? Olivia asked, trying to steady her shaking hands. Yes, Amy confirmed. He has an opportunity he'd like to discuss with you. Can you be here in 30 minutes? Olivia's heart began to race, a sudden surge of hope flooding her chest. Could this be the break she had been waiting for? Maybe the universe wasn't done with her. As Olivia sat in her car, making the drive toward downtown Charlotte, her mind raced. Was this truly happening? Was Michael Jordan really interested in speaking to her? She had always dreamed of something more, of being able to offer Emma the life she deserved. But everything she'd hoped for seemed to always fall just out of reach. Now, here she was, summoned by one of the world's most famous athletes. And yet, a part of her couldn't shake the feeling that this was just another false hope. What if this was a mistake? What if this meeting turned out to be some cruel joke? Another door slammed in her face, another dead end. What if she was being strung along, only to face more disappointment? The closer she got to the office building, the more her doubts gnawed at her. What was Michael Jordan's interest in a waitress from Rosie's Diner? Why her? Maybe it wasn't meant to be, maybe she was fooling herself. But as she pulled into the parking garage and made her way inside the gleaming office tower, one thought echoed in her mind. What if this is the break I've been waiting for? Olivia's heart pounded in her chest as she stood in front of the gleaming Charlotte Hornets office tower. She adjusted the hem of her faded blue waitress uniform, trying to smooth out the creases that had formed during her rush drive. The parking garage had been packed, and she'd barely made it in time for her appointment. The nerves coursing through her body made her question every choice she'd made since she answered the phone earlier that morning. She felt like an imposter, standing in front of this towering symbol of success in her worn shoes and work attire. The polished glass doors, the sleek marble floors inside, everything screamed of a world she had never been part of. Olivia had seen the commercials, watched the interviews. Michael Jordan, one of the greatest basketball players of all time, was the face of an empire. And now, here she was, a waitress from a diner, invited into his world. But the thought didn't bring comfort. The weight of her impending failure, the decision she had made to take a risk, these thoughts loomed over her. She felt her stomach twist with anxiety. She pushed open the door and stepped inside, taking in the pristine lobby. The receptionist, a young woman with a perfectly pressed suit, gave her a courteous smile as she approached the desk. "Good morning. How can I help you?" the receptionist asked, her voice all smooth professionalism. I'm here for a meeting with Mr. Jordan," Olivia said, her voice uncertain. yet holding a thread of hope she wasn't entirely sure she deserved. "I'm Olivia Green." The receptionist's eyes flickered over the small slip of paper on her desk. Then she looked up with a smile. "Right. Ms. Green, please have a seat. Patricia will be with you shortly." Olivia nodded and walked to the waiting area, the sound of her shoes clicking against the polished floor echoing unervingly in the silence. She chose a chair in the corner, trying to make herself comfortable, but she couldn't stop her legs from bouncing nervously. Her thoughts spiraled. What did this all mean? Michael Jordan wanted to meet with her. But why? Was it some kind of test, or had she truly done something worthy of his attention? She hadn't even known the man last night. It was just a kind gesture to a tired stranger. Yet here she was, the last person who should be in this polished office, sitting across from towering glass windows that seemed to mock her with their perfection. She forced herself to breathe and wipe her palms on her legs. The minutes stretched out like hours. After what felt like an eternity, a woman entered the room. She was tall, with sharp features, and dressed in a perfectly tailored suit that made Olivia feel even more out of place. Her eyes were warm, yet there was an air of authority in the way she carried herself. "Ms. Green?" the woman said, her voice smooth but clipped. Olivia stood up quickly, nodding. "Yes, that's me. I'm Patricia. Mr. Jordan is expecting you," she said, her smile polite but businesslike. "Please follow me." Olivia walked behind Patricia through a series of hallways. The offices they passed were sleek and modern, the walls lined with framed jerseys, autographed basketballs, and framed photographs of Michael Jordan with other high-profile figures. Olivia couldn't help but glance at them, all mixing with dread. When they reached the final door, Patricia opened it without a word, ushering Olivia inside. The office was massive, with large windows that looked over the city, letting in an unnatural amount of light. The polished desk in the middle of the room was free of clutter, and at the far end Michael Jordan sat, his back straight, looking down at some papers. For a moment, Olivia stood frozen in the doorway, unsure of what to do next. She had never been this close to someone so famous, let alone in their office, surrounded by so much wealth and success. "Ms. Green," Jordan said without looking up, his deep voice carrying through the room. He waved a hand to the chair across from him. "Please take a seat." Olivia moved toward the chair, unsure of what to expect. He congratulates her for her unusual decision to help a stranger. But his praise feels hollow as she sat down. Jordan finally looked up at her. His gaze was cool and calculating, not warm and welcoming like she'd hoped. His eyes studied her with a dispassionate interest, almost as if he were assessing something, or worse, playing a game. "I've heard about your decision last night," he said, his voice even. "You chose to break the rules to help a stranger. An unusual decision, but one that speaks volumes about your character." Olivia felt a small flicker of pride, but it was quickly extinguished by the coldness in his words. There was no genuine admiration in his tone, just the clinical observation of someone evaluating the usefulness of another person. Jordan didn't offer any more compliments, no warm smile, no sign that he truly cared about her act of kindness. Instead, he simply folded his hands in front of him and leaned back in his chair, watching her. "You must understand, however," he continued, "that people like you, people who bend the rules, can be very valuable to a brand like mine. Your willingness to go against protocol, to take risks without thinking about the consequences. Well, that's something I can use." Olivia's stomach churned at his words. She had thought she was helping a man in need, offering kindness to someone who clearly required it. But here, in this sleek office, her actions felt reduced to nothing more than a tool for his image. "Let me explain," Jordan said, his voice growing more calculated as he shifted in his seat. "I've been watching you, Olivia. Not for your kindness, not for the heart you showed last night, but for how you handled bending the rules. I knew you'd make the right choice. You see, I'm always watching, always evaluating people to see how far they're willing to go for a cause." Olivia's blood ran cold. This wasn't the opportunity she had imagined. This wasn't a chance to help kids, to make a real difference. This was a test, a twisted evaluation of how far she could be pushed without questioning it. He didn't care about her values or her struggles. He saw her as nothing more than a pawn in his empire, a tool for his brand. "You're good at what you do, Olivia," Jordan said with a faint, almost predatory smile. "But the question is, how far will you go for us?" "For me?" Olivia's hands clenched tightly in her lap, her mind racing. She had made a choice last night, a choice that now felt like a mistake. But it was too late to turn back now. She was here, in this cold office, with the weight of an impossible decision pressing on her shoulders. Michael Jordan leaned forward, his eyes narrowing slightly as he placed a thick folder on the table between them. "I'm offering you a position with the Jordan Foundation," he said, his voice smooth but laced with an edge of authority. "Community Outreach Director. We have a lot of projects, youth programs, sports camps, the works. But here's the thing. I don't just need anyone. I need someone who's willing to follow the rules when it matters." Olivia's head was spinning. Community Outreach Director? She had always dreamed of something like this, a chance to make a real difference. But as he spoke, the unease in her gut only grew. "And don't worry," he continued, as if sensing her hesitation. "The salary is more than what you're used to, and you'll have everything you need to make an impact. We'll give you the resources." It was an offer so tempting it made her pulse race. But then, the weight of his gaze made her question everything. Was it really about helping kids? Or was it just another way for him to exploit her and her willingness to play by his rules? "You'll need to sign quickly," Jordan said, his voice lowering slightly, almost to a whisper. "The position is time-sensitive, and the board is waiting. You wouldn't want to miss out on this opportunity, would you?" As he slid the contract across the table, Olivia noticed the way his hand hovered just above it, like he was waiting for her to sign before she could fully understand the stakes. She flipped through the pages, and though the numbers were high, the terms were filled with vague promises and hidden clauses. It became clear that this offer wasn't a gift. It was a trap. The job, the money, it was all part of a controlling system, one where she had no true power, no room for error. She would be just another puppet, dangling from Jordan's strings. Olivia's breath caught in her throat as she glanced back up at Jordan, the reality of the situation setting in. This wasn't the dream job. This was a gilded cage. But before she could voice her doubts, Jordan smiled, a sharp, almost predatory grin. "I know what you're thinking. You're questioning whether it's worth it. But you don't have any other options, Olivia. No one else is going to give you this kind of chance. And trust me, if you don't take it, someone else will." His words were like a heavy weight pressing down on her chest. There it was, the manipulation, the pressure, the belief that she was trapped. Olivia looked down at the contract again, the words blurring as her hands shook. What choice did she really have? After signing the contract, Olivia couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that had settled deep in her chest. But with bills to pay, a daughter to support, and the looming promise of a better future, she convinced herself that this was the only way forward. The contract, laced with so many clauses, stipulations, and hidden dangers, had felt like a necessary evil. The first day in her new role was nothing like she had imagined. The office, still as pristine and cold as it had been the day she stepped into the Hornet's Tower, made Olivia feel smaller with every passing moment. She was no longer the waitress from Rosie's Diner. Now, she was the Community Outreach Director for the Jordan Foundation, a title that carried weight, but not the kind she had hoped for. Within hours, she was thrust into a whirlwind of responsibilities that felt overwhelming, far beyond her capabilities. There were endless meetings, conference calls with donors and partners, reports she was expected to review, and event plans that she had no experience organizing. Jordan's team, a group of slick, well-paid professionals, expected results fast. Every moment she spent in that office felt like a performance, a show where her role was to smile, nod, and deliver what was asked of her, no questions asked. The hours bled together in a blur of meaningless tasks, most of which had nothing to do with helping the community. Instead, it was all about appearances, managing the foundation's image, keeping the press happy, and ensuring Jordan's public persona stayed pristine. The work didn't matter. What mattered was optics, making everything look as if the foundation was making a real difference, even if it wasn't. Her daughter, Destiny, had always been her guiding light, her reason for pushing through the exhaustion, for trying to make the best of any situation. But now Olivia felt like she was losing touch with her. She couldn't help but notice the cracks in the perfect veneer she had tried to build for them both as Olivia settled into her role. The truth began to reveal itself, piece by piece. The foundation wasn't a place dedicated to helping children or making the world a better place. No, it was a business, a machine designed to generate wealth and maintain an image of charity. She started noticing how carefully orchestrated everything was, from the events to the press releases. There were no genuine plans to provide real opportunities to disadvantaged kids. Instead, the outreach programs were designed more for photo ops, brand recognition, and sponsors. She had seen it firsthand when a local event was thrown for a group of underprivileged youth. Olivia was tasked with managing the event, coordinating with a group of volunteers, and overseeing the day's activities. But as she looked around, the kids were more like props, placed in front of cameras, their stories curated to paint the foundation as a hero. It was all smoke and mirrors. There were no meaningful interactions, no long-term commitments. It was about the optics, about making the foundation look like it was doing good work. But behind the scenes, Olivia realized that the kids were being exploited, their lives used as a commodity for Jordan's brand. The number of times she'd heard the phrase brand alignment in meetings made her stomach turn. The true nature of the work, promoting a glossy, manufactured narrative of generosity, made Olivia feel like she was suffocating. She had thought she was doing something noble, something that could make a difference, but now she felt like just another cog in Jordan's machine. A pawn, shuffled around for his benefit, nothing more. The promises Jordan had made when he offered her the job now felt like hollow, empty words. He had spoken about supporting children's dreams, giving them a chance to rise above their circumstances, but Olivia could see how those dreams were nothing more than a marketing tool. His speeches were rehearsed, the same lines repeated at every event, every press conference. There was no real care about the kids, no true investment in their futures. The foundation's scholarships were limited, and the opportunities were few and far between. It felt like a game, a way for Jordan to burnish his legacy, while the kids he claimed to help were left in the shadows. She had hoped this role would be a stepping stone, an opportunity to build something real, something lasting for Destiny. Instead, she found herself working in an environment where she had no power, no voice. Every decision she made had to be filtered through layers of bureaucracy. Every moment of progress was met with another obstacle. Olivia thought back to the moment she had signed the contract, the hope she had felt when she first walked into the building. Now, that hope seemed so distant. This wasn't the opportunity she had dreamed of. This was a trap. At first, Olivia thought things would be different for Destiny. She thought that with this new position, she would be able to secure everything her daughter had ever wanted. Destiny had dreams of basketball camp, dreams of making it to the WNBA one day. And Olivia had promised her that this job would make those dreams a reality. But as the weeks went by, it became clear that Destiny's dreams were slipping further away. Despite the promises made by the foundation, there were no special programs for kids like her, no scholarships or support that would elevate her. The camp she had once been so hopeful about never materialized. The foundation's focus wasn't on nurturing young athletes or giving them opportunities. It was about appearances. And Destiny, with her raw talent and unwavering ambition, was being left behind. At home, Destiny had grown quieter. The excitement that had once filled her when she talked about basketball was now replaced with frustration. Olivia would catch her staring at the TV screen during games, her eyes distant, her shoulders slumped. She had been hoping that this job would bring them closer to Destiny's dreams. Instead, it had pushed them further away. Olivia saw how the world around Destiny was changing, how the kids from wealthier backgrounds, kids who had access to the right coaches, the right equipment, the right networks, were getting ahead. Destiny's athletic talent went unnoticed, buried beneath the weight of her circumstances. She couldn't afford the training, the personal coaching, or the opportunities that other kids took for granted. It was hard to watch. Olivia saw the tears in Destiny's eyes when she came home after another practice, knowing deep down that she wasn't getting the chance she deserved. Her daughter's frustration was palpable, and every day it felt like Olivia was failing her even more. She had promised her something better, and now it seemed that promise would never be kept. One evening, Destiny broke down in tears, her emotions spilling over as she vented her anger and hurt. Why do they get everything? Why do they get the coaches, the money, the support, and I don't? I'm better than them. Why can't I get a chance? Olivia didn't have an answer. She had promised to make it all better, to give her daughter the world, and now she was watching that world crumble. The worst part? Destiny didn't see it as a failure of the system or of Olivia's efforts. She saw it as her own personal failure. Her self-worth was tied up in this dream, and every obstacle felt like another piece of her falling apart. Olivia wished she could tell her it would all work out, that everything would be okay. But deep down, she knew she was running out of time. She had sold her soul to the system, and now her daughter was the one paying the price. Olivia had always prided herself on being thorough in her work. When she first joined the Jordan Foundation, she believed it was a chance to be part of something bigger, a way to make a real difference in the lives of children who were underserved. But as the weeks dragged on, something felt off. The work that was supposed to empower the community felt shallow and unsustainable. She had seen the flashy events, the social media campaigns, the well-polished appearances. But now she was starting to see the cracks in the foundation, cracks that led straight to the money. One late evening, after a particularly grueling day, Olivia found herself in the finance department, looking over budget reports she hadn't had time to review earlier. At first, it seemed like a routine check, but the numbers didn't add up. Some programs were grossly overfunded, while others, programs that actually helped kids, were underfunded or had funds misappropriated without explanation. There were substantial investments in luxury properties, private jets, and expensive marketing campaigns that seemed entirely unrelated to the Foundation's supposed mission. The more Olivia dug, the more disturbing the revelations became. Large sums of money had been routed into personal accounts linked to Jordan's name. Business deals that had nothing to do with charity were being disguised as investment opportunities for the Foundation. Olivia's heart raced as she began to piece it all together. Money that was supposed to go toward helping children, toward making their lives better, was being siphoned off into Michael Jordan's personal empire. She knew this was serious. If this got out, it could destroy everything the Foundation claimed to stand for. But as she stared at the numbers, the weight of the decision she was about to make began to settle in. She could expose the corruption, but doing so would mean going up against one of the most powerful figures in sports and business. Olivia couldn't keep the truth to herself. The corruption was too vast, too blatant to ignore. With a trembling hand, she drafted an email outlining her findings, attaching the financial documents that detailed the misallocation of funds. She sent it to the board of directors, hoping that someone would take her concerns seriously. She had expected resistance, but she had not anticipated the extent of the pushback. Within hours, Jordan's office had already responded. A private meeting was scheduled, and Olivia was ushered into a sleek conference room, her stomach in knots. The moment she walked in, Jordan was already seated, his arms crossed, a look of calculated calm on his face. His team flanked him, their expressions unreadable. "Olivia," Jordan said coolly as she sat across from him, "I've seen your email, and frankly, I'm surprised. You've worked with us long enough to understand how things work here. Why now, after all this time, are you suddenly questioning the Foundation's operations?" Olivia's throat tightened, but she pressed on. "I'm questioning it because I can't ignore the truth. There's money being misallocated. There are investments being funneled into personal accounts. This isn't what we're supposed to be doing. This is exploitation, not charity." Jordan leaned forward slightly, his eyes narrowing, though his smile remained tight and professional. "You misunderstand, Olivia. We're running a business here. You knew that when you took the job. The Foundation's resources are used to create opportunities for the future. Not just for the kids, but for everyone involved. You don't see the bigger picture." Olivia's blood ran cold. She knew exactly what he meant. This wasn't about helping anyone. It was about furthering his own empire. But she wasn't prepared for what came next. His assistant, a tall, unblinking man in a suit, placed a thick folder in front of Olivia. Inside were fabricated reports, carefully curated to make Olivia look like a paranoid, ungrateful employee who had misinterpreted the Foundation's goals. "We can't have people disrupting our operations," Jordan said smoothly. "And while I understand you may have good intentions, Olivia, you're starting to sound like a whistleblower. Someone who doesn't get the big picture." He said the words with a chilling finality. Olivia felt the room closing in on her. "You're manipulating everything. You've turned the Foundation into a brand, a business. This was supposed to be about helping people. I can't stay silent about this." Jordan's smile widened just slightly. "I think you'll find that staying silent is the only option if you want to keep your position here, Olivia. This isn't something you want to blow up into a scandal." Over the next few days, Olivia's world began to unravel. The emails she had sent were quickly dismissed, and her actions were spun into a narrative of someone who had been misled, someone who didn't understand how the system worked. Her colleagues, who had once praised her work ethic, now eyed her with suspicion. Jordan's influence was vast, and his words carried weight that crushed any resistance from within the Foundation. Olivia found herself isolated, ignored at meetings, and left out of important decisions. Her career was slipping through her fingers, and the pressure was becoming unbearable. Her loyalty to the kids she had promised to help felt like a distant memory, overshadowed by the fear of losing everything: her job, her stability, her future. Every night, she would come home to her daughter, trying to hide the anxiety and stress that consumed her. She saw the disappointment in Destiny's eyes, but Olivia couldn't bring herself to tell her the truth. That this job, the very thing that was supposed to improve their lives, was crumbling in front of her. She wasn't sure how much longer she could keep pretending that everything was fine. Olivia was summoned to another meeting with Jordan. She had no choice but to go. The weight of what had been happening, of the decisions she had made, hung heavily on her chest. As she walked into his office, she felt the familiar sense of dread settle in her stomach. This time, there was no pretense of professionalism. Jordan sat behind his desk, his eyes cold and calculating, and there was something darker in his demeanor than ever before. His team was not in the room, but the feeling of being watched was suffocating. "Olivia," Jordan said slowly, his voice low and dangerous, "you've been causing a lot of trouble lately. I've been patient with you, but if you continue to stir the pot, if you continue to question things that are none of your concern, I will ruin you." Olivia's breath caught in her throat. He wasn't just threatening her job. He was threatening her livelihood, her reputation. Everything she had worked for could vanish in an instant. "Do you think you can stand up to me?" he continued, his voice thick with authority. "I can end your career, your reputation. I can make sure you're never hired anywhere again. Do you really want to go down this road, Olivia?" The fear in her chest was suffocating. She felt like she was drowning in his words, in the reality of what was at stake. But the truth gnawed at her. She couldn't be a part of this anymore. Olivia sat silently, the weight of her options pressing down on her. On one hand, she could stay silent. She could let the corruption continue, let the kids remain exploited, and secure her future, at least for a while. Destiny would have a future, a chance at basketball, a shot at something better. But on the other hand, she had always told herself that she would do the right thing. She had promised herself that she would fight for what was just, even when it was hard. Now, she was standing at a crossroads, one that could destroy her career and her future, and in the end, Olivia made the decision that tore her apart. She couldn't stay silent. She couldn't let the truth be buried. Standing up from the chair, she looked at Jordan, her voice steady despite the fear that churned inside her. "I'm going to expose everything," she said, her voice calm but resolute. "I can't be a part of this anymore. You've built an empire on the backs of people like me, like the kids you claim to help. I won't stay quiet." Jordan's face twisted in rage, but Olivia didn't flinch. She had made her decision. The moment she left his office, her world came crashing down. Her career, her future, Everything she had built was gone in an instant. She didn't know what would happen next, but she was certain of one thing. Her life was about to change forever. The days after Olivia's decision to expose the corruption within the Jordan Foundation felt like an endless blur. It was as though the world she had fought so hard to build, her job, her stability, her daughter's future, had all crumbled overnight. The fallout from speaking out had been swift and brutal. Within hours of her confrontation with Jordan, her email had gone viral, leaked to the press by anonymous sources within the foundation. The headlines were brutal: former foundation employee exposes corruption at Jordan's charity, and whistleblower accuses Michael Jordan of using his foundation for personal gain. While Olivia had hoped that the truth would shine through, what followed was an avalanche of public backlash. The media, of course, played its part, painting her as a disgruntled former employee, someone who had misunderstood the big picture of Jordan's philanthropy. It didn't take long before Olivia was labeled a troublemaker, a liability. Her career was effectively destroyed, and with it, her credibility. The calls she had made to friends and contacts, people she had once considered allies, all went unanswered. The network of support she had thought she'd built evaporated. No one wanted to be associated with her, not in the wake of the scandal. Even the foundation's employees, many of whom she had worked alongside and trusted, distanced themselves from her, afraid that they too would be implicated. Olivia sat in the small apartment she had fought so hard to keep, staring at the empty walls as the reality of her situation sunk in. Her dreams, Destiny's dreams, they all seemed so far out of reach now. She was back at square one with no job, no reputation, and no support. Her daughter, Destiny, had been quieter since Olivia had lost her job. Olivia knew the toll this had taken on her. Destiny had once been so full of hope. Her eyes always lit up when she spoke of basketball. But now, the spark in her eyes had dimmed, replaced by a deep frustration and sorrow that Olivia couldn't fix, no matter how hard she tried. Destiny no longer asked about the basketball camps she had dreamed of attending. She had stopped bringing up the future, stopped hoping for a chance to break free from the constraints of their circumstances. It was as though Destiny had given up on her own dreams, dreams that Olivia had promised to make a reality. With bills piling up and no other options in sight, Olivia found herself back at a low-paying job, this time at a fast food restaurant. The job was nothing like the one she had left behind at the diner. Here, there was no dignity, no connection to a higher cause. She worked long hours, serving customers who barely looked her way, all while a new wave of bitterness threatened to swallow her whole. The days dragged on in a haze of grease-stained uniforms, broken machines, and constant deadlines. Olivia had taken this job because she had no choice. It was the only place that would take her. Every morning, she woke up early, put on her uniform, and dragged herself to work. And every night, she returned home exhausted, only to face her daughter's silent disappointment. At the fast food joint, Olivia met other employees who had also been chewed up and spit out by the system. There was Greg, a middle-aged man who had been laid off from a white-collar job and was now stuck serving fries to people who couldn't care less about his background. There was Jessica, a young woman who had been working at the restaurant for years, her dreams of becoming a teacher crushed under the weight of student loans and unpaid internships. There were others too, each with their own story of shattered dreams and unfulfilled potential. They all shared the same feeling. The system had let them down, and they were now stuck in a cycle with no way out. Every conversation at break time seemed to echo the same sentiment: how they were all just trying to survive, one paycheck at a time. Olivia listened to them, their stories echoing her own. But what was worse was that she felt herself slowly becoming one of them. Someone who had lost everything. Someone who was just trying to get by. It wasn't until a few weeks later that Olivia discovered the final blow to her already shattered sense of hope. She had driven past the old diner, Rosie's Diner, the place where she had worked for so many years, where she had built relationships with customers, where she had once found comfort in the routine of serving meals. But as she passed by, she saw a sign hanging above the door that made her stomach twist. "Welcome to the Jordan Youth Center." The diner, the place that had been a staple in her life, had been bought out by Jordan's foundation. Her old boss, Rosie, was nowhere to be seen, and the familiar neon lights that once flashed open 24 hours were replaced by sleek, corporate signage. It wasn't the kind of transformation Olivia had hoped for. This wasn't a place where kids from underprivileged backgrounds would learn to cook or gain real life skills. No, it was just another polished front, another way to make Jordan's empire look good. The new youth center was a hollow shell of what had once been a community-driven diner. Instead of offering real opportunities for the kids in the neighborhood, it had been converted into a space for corporate sponsors, photo ops, and branded events. The resources that should have gone toward local youth programs were being funneled directly into Jordan's business ventures. Felt like a slap in the face. The place she had worked so hard to keep afloat, the diner that had been a small part of the community, was now just another pawn in Jordan's game. And worst of all, Olivia had been a part of it. She had given him the benefit of the doubt, had believed his promises, and now she saw how he had used everything she had worked for to further his own agenda. Back at home, things had reached a breaking point. Destiny no longer spoke about basketball. Her basketball uniform lay untouched in the corner of her room, and the old basketball she used to practice with had gathered dust on the floor. Olivia tried to reach out, tried to encourage Destiny to keep going, but she could see it in her daughter's eyes. The spark that had once burned so brightly was gone. Destiny had stopped believing in her dream. How could she, when everything she had worked toward seemed like an illusion? The promises of a better future, the hope of one day playing in a real league. Those dreams now felt out of reach, buried under the weight of their reality. "I'm done, Mom," Destiny said one night, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't want to play basketball anymore. It's never going to happen. I'm just not good enough." Olivia's heart shattered. She had promised Destiny the world, but it seemed that the world had betrayed them both. She didn't know how to fix it, how to convince her daughter that dreams were still worth chasing, even when it seemed impossible. The pain of watching Destiny give up on her dreams was worse than any of the challenges Olivia had faced. It wasn't just a matter of basketball. It was the loss of hope. And in that moment, Olivia realized that not only had she lost her job and her career, but she was also losing her daughter to a world that had crushed both of their hopes. The weight of Olivia's choices hung heavy over her, each passing day a reminder of how far she had fallen. Sitting in the dim light of her small apartment, she stared at the worn kitchen table, the bills stacked high in front of her, each one another reminder of what she had lost. The job at the Jordan Foundation, the fleeting hope of helping others, it was all gone now. Her career was destroyed, her reputation tarnished beyond repair, and all she had left were the memories of what could have been. She had hoped, even naively so, that by doing the right thing, by exposing the corruption, she would somehow be rewarded for her integrity. But reality had quickly shown her the truth. The system was not built for people like her. It was built to grind down anyone who dared to stand up. She had lost not just her job, but her place in the world, her sense of purpose. What was she now? Just another person swept under the rug, forgotten and discarded. Olivia tried to push past the grief, to focus on the present, but it was hard. The despair felt all-encompassing, a weight she couldn't shake. Every day felt like an endless cycle of humiliation and defeat. She couldn't even offer her daughter the life she had promised her. She had failed both of them, and yet, something lingered within her. A small spark, deep in her chest, refusing to be extinguished. It was the same spark she had once held when she started working at Rosie's Diner, when she believed in the potential for something better. It was the spark that had pushed her to expose the truth, even when it seemed like the cost was too high. Maybe, just maybe, there was a chance for redemption, a chance to rebuild from the ruins of her own brokenness. But for now, all Olivia could do was wait. Wait for some sign, some breakthrough, some way to make everything right again. Destiny had been quiet for weeks. Her basketball shoes had collected dust in the corner of her room, and her once vibrant energy for the game seemed to have disappeared, replaced by a disillusionment that Olivia could see in her eyes. But despite everything, Olivia knew that her daughter still carried the same fire inside of her. It was just buried beneath the layers of disappointment, the crushing weight of broken promises, and the lies she had once believed about the world. One evening, as Olivia returned home from her grueling shift at the fast food joint, she found Destiny sitting on the edge of the couch, staring at the television. The screen flashed highlights of a recent WNBA game, but Destiny wasn't watching in the way she used to. She wasn't dreaming about being one of those players anymore. Instead, she seemed detached, a shadow of the girl who once wanted nothing more than to make it to that stage. "Destiny?" Olivia said, her voice tentative. Destiny looked up, her expression flat. "What's the point, Mom? You worked so hard for me to have a shot, and look where we are. What's left?" Olivia's heart clenched. She had no answers, no way to reassure her daughter, no way to fix what had been broken. But as she watched Destiny, she realized something. Something that had been building for weeks. Her daughter wasn't giving up. She was simply figuring out a way to play the game on her own terms. Destiny's fire hadn't burned out. It had just been redirected. "I know you're disappointed," Olivia said softly, sitting beside her daughter. "But your dreams don't end with the foundation. You've got something they can't take away. You've always had it. You don't need them to make it. You can make it on your own." Destiny's eyes flickered with a new determination, a spark returning to her gaze. "I know, Mom," she said, her voice steady. "I've been thinking. I don't need anyone's approval to play. I can still do this. I just have to work harder. Do it my way." Olivia smiled, the first genuine smile she had given in a long time. Destiny wasn't giving up. She was rising above it all. And in that moment, Olivia knew that her daughter had inherited the very resilience that had kept Olivia going for all these years. Destiny was going to find her own path, one where the corrupt system didn't have the power to define her. In the days that followed, Olivia began to reflect on the choices she had made, the path she had taken. She had lost the battle, but maybe that wasn't the end of the story. She had stood up for what was right, even when it cost her everything. Maybe she hadn't won, but in a way, she had revealed the true nature of the world around her. The system was broken, and her story was just one of many that reflected the harsh realities faced by so many people. She thought back to the employees at the fast food joint, the people she had met after losing her job. They were all part of a broken system, a system that chewed people up and spat them out, promising success but delivering only failure. They were stuck in a cycle just like she had been. But Olivia realized something important. She was no longer a part of that cycle. She had seen the system for what it was, and though she had lost the battle, she was no longer afraid to face the truth. Olivia was no longer willing to blindly accept the world's rules, the lies it told about success, about hard work, about the American dream. She was done playing the game by their terms. She wasn't going to sit quietly while the system exploited people like her and Destiny. No, she had been broken by the system, but she had also been reshaped by it. And now, with nothing left to lose, she was ready to fight for something real. Destiny had always believed in the system. The idea that if you worked hard enough, stayed true to your dreams, you would be rewarded. She had been told that success was within her reach if she played the game. But now, she saw the truth. The system wasn't designed for kids like her. It was designed for the rich, the powerful, and the connected. It was a system that rewarded people for playing by its rules, even if those rules meant sacrificing others. But Destiny had learned something new from her mother's struggle. The system wasn't the only way. She could create her own path. She didn't need the approval of anyone who didn't see her potential. She didn't need the foundation's resources, the expensive camps, or the corporate sponsorships. Destiny's talent was her own, and she was determined to make it count on her terms. With this new understanding, Destiny started to train on her own. She found small community gyms, reached out to local coaches, and worked with other kids who didn't have the resources but shared the same drive. She wasn't going to wait for permission to live her dream anymore. She was going to take it step by step, no matter how small the victories were. Every day, she trained harder, refining her skills, learning to trust herself, and rejecting the notion that she was too young, too poor, or too invisible to make it. One evening, after a particularly intense workout, Destiny stood outside, looking at the stars as the cool air washed over her. She felt a quiet sense of determination settle in her bones. She wasn't just playing for herself anymore. She was playing for every kid who had been told they couldn't make it, for every dreamer who had been crushed by the system. She wasn't going to let her story end in defeat. Her journey had just begun.